everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and it's my favourite time of the week, and it's one of my favourite times of the week, because not only is it Friday, gotta get down on Friday, it's mandatory, it's also the first Friday after Wrestle Kingdom. Rebecca Black is excited, and so am I. So let's take a look at all of my wrestlers of the week. First of all, of course, let's take a look at some honourable mentions. Keith Lee became the #1 contender to the North American Championship over in NXT, and don't you forget about the other Lee, Jake Lee, in All Japan, who came up short again in his quest to capture the title over there. Another honourable mention to Hiromi Takahashi, who didn't take Jericho too seriously, let's be honest, and ended up losing to Le Champion, you silly, silly Billy. And also, and it pains me to do this, an honourable mention to Kenta. What a dick. What a dick. Now on to my top 10, and coming in at number 10 is the man who won the Never Openweight Championship at Wrestle Kingdom Night 2, Hiroki Goto. Everybody always talks about how Goto doesn't get enough love. He's very, very underrated, but because everybody talks about that, does that mean that he gets precisely the right amount of love? I'm not quite certain. Regardless, Goto had a really, really good match against Kenta for the Never Openweight Championship and defeated him in stiff, hard-hitting fashion. It was, I've hurt my hands a little bit there. It was really, really impressive stuff and a bit wince-inducing at times. Now, Dave Meltzer in the recent Wrestling Observer newsletter gave this match a surprisingly low score. I think it was 2.5, 3.5 stars, something like that. I thought it was far higher. I thought it was a match of intensity, of real personal storytelling, and also, as I mentioned, of very hard-hitting action. It was nice and satisfying to see Goto pick up the big victory over the man who betrayed his best friend Katsuyori Shibata as well, and I think we're off to a pretty good start. 1 point to you, Goto. God, 1 point. He is underappreciated, isn't he? I'm really sorry. Number 9, in the words of Justin Roberts, it's I'm not going to bother doing the whole... It's Moxley. It's Moxley. Now, Moxley didn't have the most spectacular matches at Wrestle Kingdom, but he did compete on nights 1 and 2 and managed to win both times. What a greedy little boy. And both of those matches were entertaining in their own right, even though they didn't really touch the higher level stuff on either show. My favourite of the two, and I suspect most people's favourite of the two, was night 1's match against Lance Archer for the US title. It was a last man standing match, sort of. It was a Texas death match under last man standing rules with submissions turned on. And they made full use of the stipulation. It wasn't too different really, apart from the plastic bag spot, I guess, to a WWE last man standing style no DQ match basically. But because those sort of stipulations are rarely used in New Japan Pro Wrestling, the crowd were just fully invested and really hot for it. Shout out to Moxley as well for catching our boy Gabriel Kidd, former WCPW Internet Champion of course, from the apron when Archer tried to use him as a weapon. Can't be using young lions as a weapon, Archer. Although he is a heel, so I guess it does make a little bit of sense. And on night 2, Moxley continued his winning ways, defeating Juice Robinson and defending the United States title. Juice was good, I just preferred both men's matches from night 1. I preferred Moxley's match against Archer, and I preferred Juice's tag team match against my boys, the Gorillas of Destiny. Guerrilla tactics, it's time for warfare. How does Tama Tonga move like he does? It's quite strange. And topping off Moxley's week, there was that excellent segment at the end of AEW Dynamite this week, where he refused Jericho's offer to join the Inner Circle. And I loved that line, I really loved it, and I hope it gets used in a lot of video packages, I'm sure it will, where basically Moxley goes, you've offered me all these material things, but I don't want anything. You haven't got anything that I want apart from that, the AEW World Championship, and immediately shattered a bottle of the bubbly over Jericho's head. It was such a great moment. With that Attitude Era sort of frenetic energy, it was brilliant. Not a match, but a big factor in Moxley making the list this week. Number 8, I've just mentioned him, Le Champion, crack open a little bit of the bubbly for Chris Jericho. Jericho was, of course, part of that excellent segment as well. He really played his role well there on Dynamite, but this is mainly for the fact that he beat Hiromi Takahashi clean as a whistle in the Tokyo Dome on night 2 of Wrestle Kingdom. And as I mentioned in the honorable mentions section of this video, I just got the feeling that Tanahashi deliberately in storyline didn't take Jericho too seriously at all. He was mocking him in the opening video package with the fake band, the Fozzy band around him. He was dressed as Jericho. It looked really silly and funny. Everyone loved it. And he went out and just got outfought by Chris Jericho. I mean, you knew that Tanahashi was the favourite to win the match if wrestling was real. He's in better condition. He had him more scouted. He rode out the way of a frog splash or a high fly flow at one point and then smiled to the camera like, I'm playing possum, I've got him. But when it came down to the nitty gritty, Jericho just had more desire to win. I'm treating this like it's totally real. You know what I mean? It was portrayed that way and it told an effective storyline. Credit as well to Jericho and to Tanahashi as well for their impressive submission sequences. It can be easy to get a bit bored during certain matches when a submission's been clamped on for a long time, but Tanahashi was caught in, I think, 3 walls of Jericho. Maybe one of them was a lion tamer variation. He was caught in 3 big submission spots, and the way that both men struggled and pulled each other backwards and forwards, it kept everybody on the edge of their seats for prolonged periods of time, and that's a real skill that I think in wrestling is often quite telling with experience. Not much more to say about that match. I thought it was good. I think I may have enjoyed it a shade less than a lot of people did, just compared to some of the other matches on the card on both nights, because it was a really impressive weekend of wrestling. But it was good enough, and the win for Jericho was impressive enough to earn him 3 crucial points on Wrestlers of the Week. Next up, number 7, let's go over to All Japan Pro Wrestling. I'm sorry, the streak's broken. I thought New Japan were going to whitewash this entire list this week, but they haven't, because you can't look past the ace of All Japan, Kento Miyahara. Kento once again defended the Triple Crown Championship, and he's really become like the Okada, as it were, although that's a bit ironic saying that now, but he has become the unshiftable ace of the promotion, the unshiftable top dog, the big dog, if you want to go that direction with it. Don't know why you would, because they're not really similar at all. Miyahara's opponent was Jake Lee, don't you forget about Jake, who I mentioned in the honourable mentions, and they've got a really good chemistry, but I feel like sometimes it risks diminishing returns, because if Jake Lee comes up short every time he faces Kento for the title, the fans are going to stop believing he can do it. Maybe this is his last shot. Maybe his last shot for a while, maybe his last shot while Kendo's the champion, I don't know. It doesn't change the fact that this was a very exciting match, and Kendo did really, really well standing out on a weekend where all the attention was focused solely at New Japan rather than All Japan. Number 6, a man who has rapidly become and proven himself to be one of the most complete heels in wrestling today. I'm talking, of course, about the Switchblade, Jay White. Now, Jay White's matches weren't the most spectacular of Wrestle Kingdom weekend, but they were the most solid. I think that they had a very clear story running through both of them. A very traditional wrestling story, the good guy, the fan favourite, versus the awful heel you want to see get his face kicked in. And that didn't happen on either night. Yes, Jay White lost the match on night 1, but he didn't get his face kicked in by night 2. In fact, Jay White was dominating large stretches of that match, sometimes on his own, sometimes by bending the rules, and sometimes just with flagrant interference from his manager Gedo on the outside. But eventually Naito made his electric comeback, and the crowd was so hot for it, and that's not only a credit to Naito and the popularity he's built for himself over the past few years, it's also a credit to Jay White's very stellar heel work. He is a classic sort of heel, and I imagine, I'm not a wrestler so I can't say this, but I imagine he's a very good wrestler's wrestler. Let's just assume that's true. Let's just say that, why not? And then of course Jay White went into the the losers match on night 2 against Kota Ibushi, a match many people, including myself, would have expected him to lose, but he pulled out the victory just via very unscrupulous means. But it didn't come across as cheap. It came across as a heel cheating to win. It didn't come across as the booking team going, oh, what do? We need Ibushi to lose. Let's just have White cheat. Instead, it came across as very evil and very calculated by Jay White in defeating such a heroic figure like Ibushi, especially after night 1, in such a fashion. And I really enjoyed it. I also thought Gedo did a great job with his interferences and his timing on everything. He is such a good manager. And you kind of forget that, because often when he was Okada's manager, he didn't have to get involved in the matches. He simply stood and watched and laughed when Okada won and cut a promo and sent everyone home. Now that he's managing a proper rule-breaking heel, he's got the timing down on everything, as well you might expect given his decades of experience. Number 5, here he is. It's the boy himself, the 2-time Wrestler of the Week. But don't worry, because he's only come 5th this week. It's the aerial assassin, Will Ospreay. Now, I think you'll agree that Ospreay's match with Takahashi for the Junior Heavyweight Championship was just ridiculous. It was such a good match, very, very enjoyable stuff, and it featured a sequence that I've never seen in wrestling before, and judging by the response on Twitter afterwards, nobody has seen before. I'm talking about the Sasuke special sequence where Ospreay went for the Sasuke special, landed on his feet because Takahashi moved, ran up the ramp. No, he got German suplexed up the ramp, landed on his feet, casual backflip out of a German, as we can all do every day, ran at Takahashi, suffered a belly to belly into the ropes, managed to contort his body and dive through the ropes, and then hit the ropes and nail the Sasuke special properly. Eventually at the end. It was quite a ludicrous sequence, and one that you just know that when they thought of it and when they were putting the match together, they were excited for people to see it, as long as they nailed it, which they did. But the question now remains not whether Will Ospreay can keep having great matches, because this one was fantastic. A 5-star match in my opinion. I think Meltzer gave it 5+ stars, as it well deserves, because it was a phenomenal match. But the question is now, where does Ospreay go from here? And for me personally, the question is the direction that he does go in, is that going to lead to him dominating this league table again? Because I genuinely can't take that. I can't take it. My heart can't take it. I don't think my viewership can take it. I really hope somebody can step up to the plate. The destination that I think a lot of people foresee for Ospreay is the heavyweight division, which is very exciting because we saw just a taste last summer in the G1 Climax of how Ospreay can really mix it up with various guys in the heavyweight division. Guys like his stable leader Okada, Naito potentially, Bushi. I mean, we've seen Ospreay clash with Bushi before and it's always electrifying. We've seen a match with Tanahashi, that was amazing. I want to see Ospreay versus Ishii. I want to see how that goes down. I think that would be a fantastic clash of styles and a really entertaining way to go. But moving on from Ospreay now, I've talked about him enough on this series forever and ever and ever. It's time to talk about number 4, his opponent, Hiromi Takahashi. Wasn't it nice to see Takahashi back? Wasn't it just brilliant to see that cheeky little scamp hurling his body around and doing terrible, destructive things to both himself and his opponent? The answer is yes. Yes, it was lovely to see that. And if you disagree, then you're wrong and a liar and wrong. The Time Bomb was on top form despite having only recently returned from injury. This was one of his very first matches back, certainly his first big high-profile match back. And I think it was the right call to have him win as well. The match was really back and forth and so good that it almost didn't matter who won. But I say almost because I do think on reflection, I am very happy that Takahashi won that title back. He never truly lost it. And I feel like the fact that he did so against an opponent of Ospreay's caliber has immediately shot him back into major contention, not only in the junior heavyweight division, of course he's at the top of that now, but just in the general landscape of New Japan. And of course there's that new finisher of his, that Emerald Flosion-esque slam, just right onto Ospreay's neck. I mean, it wasn't the worst way to land, I suppose. If you're gonna land on your neck and upper back, that might be the best way to do it, but it looked devastating, which I guess was the point. It finished off the match, and it's made Takahashi an immediate threat to anybody who tries to take his title. It's great to see him back. I'm very excited, and he gets a lovely chunk of points on Wrestlers of the Week. Number 3, oh, he came so close, and in the end was so far away. It's our beautiful boy and the king of all of our hearts after last weekend. It's Kota Ibushi. Ibushi's match with Okada on night 1 was insane and my favourite match of the whole weekend. It's probably going to end up being one of my favourite matches of the year. It obviously had that very slow start, but once they got going and once Ibushi fired up and started striking with Okada, it was truly electrifying. This match was so good in part because of the swinging back and forth momentum and also the near falls. I know that it's a bit of a cliche, a bit of a stereotype of New Japan, that it's just lads kicking out of each other's finishes all the time. But when it's done right and when it's paced right and when it's sprinkled in the right spots throughout a big time main event match, there's truly nothing like it in the world of wrestling these days. I mean, New Japan main events are the main events in wrestling. And there were so many good moments here, from Ibushi, as I mentioned, just striking with Okada and taking him down and continuing to strike him while he was on the floor. Really brutal, hard shots as well. There was one that just looked like a straight punch to the face, and may well have been. But not just those sort of spots. There was the ones like the head kick into the V-trigger, Kenny Omega's move, of course. There was the Rainmaker counter into a Rainmaker of Ibushi's, which was unique and brilliant and led to an insane near fall. And yeah, or did that even lead to a near fall? There were so many things in this match that I can't quite remember what happened in what order, but I just know that it was all absolutely brilliant. Then we get to night 2, that match against Jay White, a far more stripped back match, a more classic good guy versus bad guy encounter. Yes, Ibushi lost, but I thought his performances across both nights was absolutely top notch, and if it had been any normal week, he would have unquestionably been my Wrestler of the Week. But it wasn't any normal week, was it? Not by a long shot. Number 2, my boy, my guy, my boy. I couldn't think of a third word to describe him. Tetsuya Naito, which is quite fitting really, isn't it? Because even in the week where he became the first ever double champion in New Japan history, he can't quite become Wrestler of the Week, can he? Someone was there to take his moments away. And in the real show at Wrestle Kingdom Night 2, after he'd won both belts, someone was there to take the moment away from him. Kenta, you dick, Kenta. Unforgivable. Naito's performances weren't as flashy as some of his peers on this list, from Ibushi to Ospreay to Takahashi, but they were so supported. Is that the right way to describe it? He was so over. Everybody willing Tetsuya Naito on to victory. The stereotype about Japanese crowds is that they're not as vocal and not as rowdy as Western crowds. Watch these matches with Naito and listen to the crowd go mental for him. This is a very, very over guy. And in hindsight, the only correct decision, I think, was to have Naito win both of those belts at the end of the weekend. The first match against Jay White, we've already talked about. It was lovely stuff, classic bad guy versus good guy stuff. Naito spent a lot of the match selling his leg, selling general exhaustion and being beaten down by Jay White. But when he made his comeback, as any good babyface does, he got the crowd on their feet. Night 2, however, was a slightly different kettle of fish. That had more history to it, didn't it? That had the whole history of Naito versus Okada. If you go back to 2 years ago at Wrestle Kingdom 12, Naito lost in the main event to Okada when everybody thought that was his time. As it turns out, we all owe Gedo, the booker, a massive apology, because when Naito lost that match, everybody was like, Gedo, what have you done? You absolute moron. You hate Naito. You'll never give him his moment of glory. How can you have done this? Little did we know that 2 years later, it would have been an even more perfect moment for Naito to win, and that's exactly what happened. And that moment when Naito went for the Stardust Press, which he did 2 years ago and it cost him the match, he went for it again, which was a really tense moment in itself. Is he going to hit it? Then he hit it. Then Okada kicked out, and that led to even more tension because now it's like, well, he's never going to win the match then. That was the move he was meant to win with. But then Naito went back to his more unscrupulous, his more ungovernable, LIJ side and hit the Destino, his LIJ finisher, and picked up the victory. And it just doesn't get more perfect than that, does it really? You could argue that it would have been more perfect had Kenta not battered him after the final bell. But, it wasn't... It's led to an immediate hot feud. I will give it that. I'm still not certain about my opinions of that whole post-match angle, but it has led to a very hot feud straight out of the gate for Naito as champion. But now we have to stop talking about Naito, even though he is the IWGP Heavyweight and Intercontinental Champion, because we have to talk about this week's number one and my wrestler of the week, and a man who came away from Wrestle Kingdom empty-handed, but that doesn't take away from just a pair of amazing performances. It's the Rainmaker, it's the Ace, it's arguably the best wrestler in the world, Kazuchika Okada. To me, it was quite obvious that if you watch this year's Wrestle Kingdom on both nights, that Okada is kind of a cut above everybody else when it comes to putting together a main event match and executing it to perfection. And he did it 2 nights in a row. And they were both long matches as well. I can't imagine in what good condition he must be to be able to put on 2 matches of such caliber on back-to-back nights. Night 1, as I mentioned, was my favourite match of the entire week. That was Okada versus Bushi, probably going to be a match of the year candidate come the end of 2020. And it was fantastic, but I can't stop thinking about Okada's entrance, which made him seem like just the final boss, everybody was saying on social media, of New Japan, the final boss of wrestling. He came out in that gleaming white ring robe jacket, and it lit up in the dark, and my analysis has gone to pot here. I'm just talking about how cool his light up glowy jacket was, but watch that entrance. It was something else. Of course, the entrance is only effective if the performance backs it up, and the performance more than backed it up. Okada won that match in heartbreaking fashion for Ibushi fans, but then obviously it was the right call. Naito overcoming Ibushi in the main event of Night 2 wouldn't have been as big, I don't think. Naito overcoming Okada, the man he could never quite get it done against when it really mattered, that's a proper story. And Okada was the perfect foil, or the perfect opponent, the perfect antagonist. Even though he's not a heel, he was healing it up at certain stages, working the leg that Naito had wrecked the night before by Jay White mercilessly, again and again, drawing boos from certain sections of the Tokyo Dome and shrugging it off, being like, I don't care. You could tell in that moment he was thinking, I was a heel a few years ago, I'm used to this, I don't care what you think. It was brilliant. Then of course he lost after several really close calls towards the end of the match, and then at the end when Naito, before Kenta got involved, when Naito shouted him out on the microphone, and from the crowd being led away, Okada gave him the LIJ fist salute and said, yes, let's do this one more time. Okada is the best. Okada is the best at wrestling, at being cool, at everything, at entrances. Okada is the best, and I could not, even on the week when Naito won 2 titles, I could not give this number 1 spot to anybody else. 10 points to you, Okada. Congratulations, you are my wrestler of the week. Now let's take a look at the league table. Not a lot to really comment on because this week 10 totally different guys got points compared to last week. So you'll see as we go down, 2 people are on 10, 2 are on 9, 2 are on 8, etc, etc. It won't become more telling until a few weeks in when the same guy has picked up multiple points across various weeks. Will it be Okada? Maybe. He's the best in the world. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.